salmon farming industry is really crucial to small communities, and the instability is very stressful to all of us.
We're trying to build a fish farm industry here based on a whim of a few people that say that, oh, you know, it's destroying the wild salmon. And we're going, where's the proof? There isn't any.
It's scary. My banks ask me, what's going to happen? And when I say, I don't know, we just hope that the right decisions are going to be made. And then what happens to the jobs? What do I tell the 75 families that I employ if they take that away?
They're playing with an industry. They're playing with people's lives.
There's so many wrong conceptions about the salmon farming industry.
They're environmentalists. If they don't have good water quality, if they are polluting the waters around their farms, they're out of business.
The positive stories that have come out of the salmon farming industry has bolstered the hope that people in Vancouver Island have for the future.
Stand behind an industry. Stand behind a Canadian industry.
We are ready.
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 Hello, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. I will be the moderator for this session that we're about to do on seaweed and finfish aquaculture. I am presently in my office in Victoria and would like to acknowledge that I am on the ancestral territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Lekwungen-speaking nations of the Songhees and the Esquimalt. So this conversation today is going to involve three people with some really interesting, unique, and diverse input into what our topic is for today. First of all, John Paul Fraser is the Executive Director of the BC Salmon Farmers Association, also the sponsor for this event. Jennifer Woodland is the CEO of the Newchannel Seafood Company. It's a First Nation-owned seafood enterprise. She's also the chair of the Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance. And Bill Collins is the chair of Cascadia Seaweed. John Paul, I want to say thank you to you, first of all, for you stepping up to be the sponsor for this event. Why is that? Why does this sort of thing mean something to you?
Well, we love the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. It's very, very important to the island that we have our own conversation and we bring people into it. Vancouver Island's a special place, and the Alliance is a big part of making sure everyone understands how special it is, but also what the special opportunities are. And we're sitting on one when it comes to aquaculture. So we thought, let's get in there and make sure that we have a really good conversation about the opportunities that are in our hands or potentially not. It's up to us. So happy to be a sponsor.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to talk about opportunity here and what that does entail when we talk about seaweed and finfish and aquaculture in general. Jennifer and Bill both, of course, have roots in Newfoundland. And here you are on the other coast. But Jennifer, you're going to be talking with us about, in particular, I'd like to focus on some of the opportunity for the First Nations business operations. Let's do a quick snapshot of your organization. St. Jean's Cannery is basically who you are now, right?
Yes, so thank you very much for allowing me to be here and speak today. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the Weewakam, Weewakai, Hamalko, and Comox First Nations territory. And yes, I'm the CEO of Newchannel Seafood. So Newchannel Seafood is a wholly owned commercial fishing business that is fully owned by First Nations. So our shareholding nations are Cayuga Chucklasset First Nation, Dididat First Nation, Uchucklesset Tribe Government, Ucluelet First Nation, and Hawaiiat First Nations. And so we always talk about our 3 R's. Our mission is to reconnect our nations with their ocean resources, to revitalize our communities through activities within the ocean, and see a reemergence of pride through their facilitation with the ocean. And we offer planning and business planning and feasibility to any nation or community member. But we also look for opportunities in all areas of seafood, in commercial fishing and aquaculture. So we have license and quotas. We have access to commercial fisheries through that. We own St. Jean's Smokehouse and Cannery out of Nanaimo, a specialty processor that many people here on the island know and love. We have experience in retail with our St. Jean's brand, our Gratitude Seafood brand, and our Raincoast Trading brand. We develop partnerships, such as what we've developed with Cascadia Seaweed, and that agreement has actually resulted in 2 additional agreements with our shareholding nations to be commercial kelp farmers. And we have a positive and developing relationships and partnerships with the finfish industry. So basically, we look for opportunities in the ocean. We knew we had to diversify as a seafood business early on. We look for those opportunities. I conduct the feasibility, look and do the research on it. I bring those to my nations, and we're a values-based business. So any opportunity I bring forward to the nations have to go through the 3 guiding principles of the Nuu-chah-nulth people, which are Hishisawak, everything is one, Isak, a greater care, and Uathuk, caring with a modern approach. And they look forward 7 generations. So as a value-based business, that's a really incredible thing to have these opportunities and ensure that these opportunities remain an opportunity 7 generations from now, and also don't have an impact 7 generations from now.
Great, thank you. And Bill, reference made to the Uchucklesset Nation, which is one of the places and one of the nations that you're doing your operation right now. But I just got to say, in the last number of months, Cascadia's business has just gone boom. You've suddenly got this underway and you've started up. So let's talk a little bit about where you're located and what you do.
Right on. Thanks, Bruce. Hi to all, John Paul and Jennifer. It's great to be online. And I'm sitting here in Sydney, British Columbia, beautiful Sydney by the sea on Wasanich territory. So very happy to be here and partnering with all our First Nations partners up and down the island. Bruce, to answer your question, we've had discussions with folks as far north as Loch Wallam, near Prince Rupert. We have an employee in Campbell River. We've got a team member in Courtenay. We have a processing facility in partnership with the Uchucklesset and with the Port of Port Alberni, and of course the city of Port Alberni, to process seaweed there. And as I said, we're coming live today from Sydney, BC. So our intention is to be pan-British Columbia, and in fact, pan-Canada, because we're having discussions with folks out east, and pan-North America. Our goal is to be the largest producer of cultivated seaweed in North America, and we're on our way to being that.
We'll come back and sort of describe the various types of product that you do. Some is for food, some is for other purposes. But I want to just frame things around right now. We're talking about this today because economic resilience as we recover, and the term that I like to use is as we bounce forward instead of bouncing back with our economy, aquaculture, Finfish will be a big part of that. But John Paul, let me start with you. What has COVID done to the nature of your organization and your business in general?
I think what it's shown is the resiliency of our sector. We haven't had a single job loss in aquaculture. And so if you're looking for a sector moving forward to help bounce BC forward, as you say, Bruce, we've got one here on Vancouver Island. It's called salmon farming. And I would say that we're ready for that. We declared it essential service. It really energized everyone right across the sector. And when I say that, I don't mean just the folks who work on the farms, as important as our farmers are. They're at the heart of the business. We've got suppliers, small, medium-sized businesses all around northern Vancouver Island, in particular, north of Duncan is where most of our business activity is. We represent about 70 different member organizations, companies, both very large, global multinational, which is good for Vancouver Island to have big, large, global multinational companies here, because that provides, again, a resiliency, and some very small but very dynamic supplier companies through our 70 member membership. We in total support directly, indirectly, and induce about 7,000 jobs around British Columbia. Again, with Vancouver Island as sort of our powerhouse, we contribute about 1.6 billion in output overall annually into the province. We contribute about $576 million annually to BC's GDP. And we deliver for government out there listening. You'll love this part, about 90 million at least a year in money for you to the Treasury. So these are all really important things to be able to sustain and build upon to bounce forward. So right now we are a lot of people don't know this, but right here on Vancouver Island, you are home to the province's #1 seafood export. Did you know that? You are. And did you know that you are home to the #1 agri-food export in British Columbia? You are. And so the opportunities that are here now are real. The ability to grow and contribute even more is within our grasp. And to diversify a multi-trophic, to bring all sorts of different kinds of aquaculture together, with Finfish being if we can, an anchor, but certainly a supporter of all of this, could actually make Vancouver Island an absolute aquaculture powerhouse in the Pacific Theatre.
John Paul is a former provincial deputy minister, by the way, so he does speak fluent Treasury Board.
I do speak fluent Treasury Board, and I should have mentioned at the outset, I apologize that I am in Victoria, in the territory of the Coast Salish people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt and Lekwungen speaking peoples. And I would say one of the most powerful things that I've experienced is Pesha Sawak, and what that means and how we've learned and how our industry is growing in terms of responsible and real relationships with Indigenous communities. We see this as a foundation for growing the business and growing opportunity, particularly in coastal rural Vancouver Island.
Great, thank you. We're going to do a bit of a roundtable here, by the way, folks, and then we'll open it up for Q&A in a few minutes for that to happen. Jennifer, talk to me about your operation through this COVID period up until now. What's changed and what's the same?
Well, it has been an interesting time. I mean, our business, the foundation of our business is the commercial fishery. And as you know, we've seen a major shift in markets and some weaknesses and vulnerability in the seafood markets for British Columbia. So on that side of the business, it's been very challenging. Most of our product is exported fresh and into the restaurant and food service trade. So with the closures and lockdown and reduction in that, we've seen a major impact. On the other hand, we've also seen an increase in the goods that come out of St. Jean's being a shelf-stable, healthy protein. And that's what we're calling the pandemic effect. We're seeing consumers change in what their intention is in buying food. So we actually did some market research pre-COVID, redid it at the onstart of COVID, and just recently redid it again with some experience here in the pandemic. And what we're seeing is consumers are looking for, number one now, affordability, which obviously in this economic climate is very understandable. They're looking for Canadian sourced seafood. That's a buy local intention, but also a food safety intention. They also want healthy food. I mean, all we hear is about sickness and virus. People are looking to make sure they have access to healthy food. They want shelf-stable food. Fresh is no longer the king. Right now, people are looking at frozen and shelf-stable seafood that is quality as very important. They want to have that security of having that food on their shelf. It was very daunting in the early days of the pandemic to go into the stores and see empty shelves. So people still have that feeling, I need to have this healthy food ready for my family. And sustainable is still on the list, but it's evolved. It's evolved into more about a reduction in carbon footprint. So I also see that while the commercial fisheries has been challenging, aquaculture has been adapting, and with the changing consumer trends, it's a real opportunity for seafood in British Columbia. We also did some market research a couple of years ago where we were looking at developing our Gratitude Seafood brand, which is an authentic Aboriginal brand. And we did some focus group work, and we asked everybody in this focus group, you know, if you saw an authentic Aboriginal brand, what would come to your mind? And the first thing that came to mind was sustainability and health. So right now I'm looking at the adaptability. We're really seeing what's happening in the aquaculture industry, both kelp and finfish. I look at the finfish industry. I participate in a number of seafood committees. And I'm looking in the paper, and they're hiring, they're adapting, they're investing in innovation, they're investing in new technologies. And that is unusual in this economic crisis, but it shows the adaptability of that industry. And we're excited to see where that goes. And same thing on kelp. Every time we open a door, it's glaring opportunity. People want these products. People are increasing, you know, that they want healthy food. That includes increasing in plant-based diets. So for us, it's kind of been on either side. We've seen challenges in the commercial fishery, which we're working to overcome, but we certainly see opportunity in First Nations branding and the seafood sector in British Columbia as a whole.
I think the issue of, especially here because we're on an island, as you mentioned, Jennifer, the idea of food security or food sovereignty might even align with that, but sourcing local, sourcing Canadian, sourcing BC, and sourcing the island. Bill, that's what you're doing. You're creating that source on Vancouver Island. At the same time, though, much of your product will be for export, correct? So just explain that sort of balance to me, if you could.
Right. Well, here's a simple way to do it. If you look at the seaweed salad that's available at Costco, 700 tons of that was produced in last year for distribution in Canada. 3,500 tons was in the US. So there's no doubt that markets in North America as a whole are important. And I think when we talk about food security, obviously we'd love to talk local, and we do. But more importantly, I think food security for North America is really the key. For us, we're going to start on the island and the lower mainland, and we're going south along the I-5 corridor to target 500 stores next year before we start moving east. A lot of that is due to the traditional consumer of seaweed. More folks from Asian descent consume about 90% of the seaweed that comes into North America. And by the way, there was 8,000 tons imported to North America last year. We have an opportunity, as Jennifer pointed out, a tremendous opportunity to fill that gap. So when we talk about disruptors, everybody loves to talk about disruptors and innovators. What we're putting in place is a food distribution disruptor, because the vast majority comes from China and South Korea, and we can certainly disrupt that supply chain.
Maybe just a brief description of the variety of products that you create, Bill. Some are grown in water, some are grown on land, different purposes, different varieties. So maybe explain that a little bit.
Right. First of all, seaweed in general grows like a weed, and it's an algae, so it's neither a plant nor animal. But if you are trying to talk about it in terms of consumer, it definitely falls in the plant-based world. If you look last year at all the investments in general in plant-based nutrition and food, and new food entering the market, was about 750 million. This year in the first quarter, there was 750 million invested. So people want healthy, nutritious, plant-like protein to offset animal protein, or as a complement to animal protein. So we will be delivering in the market. We're doing market intelligence and focus groups at the moment, but it's looking like a seaweed jerky in the snack food sector, in the snack food part of your supermarket, a seaweed jerky, a robust chip, again, a snack food. But the difference is here. I mean, let's face it, who can go without a Lay chip? Once you eat one, you can't stop. We would like seaweed to replace potatoes, for example, as the chip of choice. And we do that by introducing it so that it is in concert with North American palate. So people generally think of seaweed as slimy and salty. It is absolutely not either. There's no salt in it per se. There's salt in the water in which it comes, and it is crunchy, and it is not slimy. So we want to take advantage of it's called an holographic process, which is the taste and feel in your mouth, the mouth feel. And we think we can deliver that to meet the North American palate. So next year, as I mentioned, we'll be in 500 stores as a seaweed jerky, as a robust cracker or snack food, like a chip. And then we'll definitely be in fresh salad, because things are changing in the marketplace. For example, Whole Foods no longer offers those buffets where you can go through and pick out your food for supper. It's going to have to demand some innovation. And by the way, Bruce, when we grow seaweed in tanks on land, which we are doing, to round out the profile of a higher protein, upwards of 40% protein can be delivered by adults. Certainly Nova Scotians know that. That can be dried and reconstituted. The way it's delivered into Japan, for example, it's dried on this side of the pond and reconstituted. And one of the properties of this macroalgae, this beautiful macroalgae, is it can reconstitute and you'd hardly know it was desiccated. So very interesting properties. It will be, our goal, by the way, is to make it a staple in North American diet. And we can pivot to that, I'm sure.
Nori is in that mix too, right? Of stuff that you do.
Yes, Nori is an interesting one. When you buy the small sheets, the one thing everybody notices is 3 layers of packaging in a silica gel pack. We can do better than that because, as you mentioned, one of the offshoot products, or one of the market verticals, is bioplastics made from seaweed. So our intention is to package our seaweed in our product, seaweed.
Great. Okay, let's move along to the business side of things here. We're going to grow this. We're going to make it big. We're going to export. We're going to create jobs. We're going to create wealth. But Jennifer, the first thing you have to do is raise capital to do it. So raising capital is something that's a challenge at the best of times. A lot of nations, quite frankly, have challenges because of things that people may or may not be aware of, that the qualification for capital by some financial sources is seen as different for First Nations. So that has to be overcome. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Well, certainly access to capital is a limiting factor for anybody entering into aquaculture. However, this year we saw PICFI, which is the Pacific Integrated Commercial Fishing Initiative, put forward funds in aquaculture, and they had $1 million that you could apply for capital investment into First Nation specific aquaculture ventures to advance First Nations interest in aquaculture. So that's telling us a couple of things. One, there's an interest amongst First Nations for aquaculture development. And in fact, to that $1 million fund, there were $3.9 million worth of applications that went in. So it shows an enormous interest. But it also shows that the government has been listening to us, because we've been talking quite a bit about this over many, many years, the need for funding to support capital investment for First Nations in aquaculture. But one of the things that we've done as a company is to look for partnerships, and we always look for partnerships with companies that meet our core values, that we have synergy in core values, and then the mutual benefit that can be had from that. So as an example, to even get an aquaculture site, you need access to a tenure. In order to get that tenure, you need to apply to the province. And a part of that application process is ensuring consultation occurs with the First Nations in whose territory you want to have this activity. And you're seeking agreement from that First Nation. So that gives the First Nations incredible leverage. In addition to that, I talked to the province a couple of weeks ago, and they have new criteria now in which they're prioritizing their applications for any aquaculture activity, well, any activity, but specifically we were talking about aquaculture, and it was about job creation, food production, and reconciliation with First Nations. So that increases the leverage again, that in order to do aquaculture in this province, you need to have a First Nations partner. And by having a First Nations partner at the onset of your activity, your application process goes more quickly, your chance of approvals increases, and the likelihood and business security that you have is enhanced. So we have found really good opportunities for us to partner with companies that meet our core values, that have strategic plans in line with ours in the direction we'd like to go for this production. And it's really offset the need for us then to look into the capital investment, because we're able to build upon these experiences, build that capacity, take it and go with it when we're ready, but really, provide this mutual benefit between partners that allows us to continue and enter into the activity.
Great, that's great. Thank you, Jennifer. So John Paul, back to you. Same kind of question. The business is already robust. Aquaculture is strong. Treasury Board is happy, but there is always potential to do more. What's the situation on accessing capital within the whole aquaculture sector in general, Finfish and the rest of it? Oh, you're on mute, John Paul. Thanks.
Pardon me. I would say that the biggest barrier to access to capital is a lack of certainty that stems from, which would be improved by stronger, more partner-oriented signals from government about what and how we can grow responsibly and sustainably in concert with nature, in concert with Indigenous communities, and positioned quite nicely as a Vancouver Island economic generator. I mean, look at what's going on right now. I mean, no one is going to be exempt from the economic catastrophic conditions of COVID-19. I'm looking at some numbers right here, but the federal government deficit is going to balloon to about $350 billion, which is about 10 times bigger than the $35 billion which has been projected. The provincial deficit's obviously going to grow. We're looking at, instead of a surplus of 225 million, we're looking at a deficit of about 12.5. That's not criticism of government. This is extraordinary time, and people need help to get through it. But the best way to get through it is also to make sure that people have jobs and people can move forward and find opportunity. And so we're sitting here at this moment where we can move forward, but there's a lack of certainty out there about our sector in particular that I think we need to fix and address coming out of COVID or moving through it, whatever the case may be. So that would be it. I mean, recognizing that food security is an important issue. I was listening to folks earlier talking a bit about that. I mean, we know that by 2030, 60% of all fish consumed will originate from aquaculture. That's a huge amount. It's a huge shift. We can see what's happening in terms of the wild capture fishery, in terms of feeding growing populations versus aquaculture. It is shifting and will shift very dramatically. And so here we are on the West Coast facing out one of the largest markets, which by the way, like seafood, I think anyone who's been to Asia, I've lived there, and I love seaweed, by the way, Bill, in all its forms. When I was there, I pretty much ate nothing but that and curry rice. But the point is we have a hungry market staring at us across the Pacific that we can really help feed. And I think that's the dynamic opportunity. And so for anyone looking to invest, you're looking at all of those conditions: food security, growing market, shift to aquaculture, a coastal economy. But so we can perceptively get the idea that farming doesn't have to be a solely terrestrial activity. Then you really have something here. You've got something that is potentially a real economic lifeline for a lot of communities. And we've done a fair amount of research in terms of the Vancouver Island economy. We're going to have a very robust opportunity report coming out at the end of October, right around the time of people viewing this session. And what you'll see is the economy for our sector is there. We're strong north of Duncan. Other industries, again, not a criticism, are not experiencing what we're experiencing, are not poised to deliver opportunities like we're poised. So government needs to recognize that and come to the table and then provide the certainty that I think will help in terms of lending and inspiring capital investment. Not all the money that we spend needs to come from a bank. Some of it does, quite a bit of it does. But a lot of it also comes from ourselves. So are we going to take a chance on ourselves to move our industry forward? Absent government saying, that's good. We're going to give you decades of certainty. Demonstrate to us that you're going to be able to do this with environmental and social responsibility, which we can and which we have over and over and over again, and we'll continue to do so. But if we put all these pieces together, we're going to have the certainty pie that's going to allow the money to come in. And for a small export-dependent economy like Vancouver Island, that could be huge. Huge. But again, you have to be able to see the opportunity and to go for it and not be scared away, because there is a loud conversation out there. Get the facts, come and visit. Go see what Jennifer is working on. Go see what Bill's working on. Come see what we're working on. And together, let's grow some certainty and awareness among each other that this is a really good thing for the island.
Bruce, may I comment on his comment on the investment? Mm-hmm. You're hearing more and more about a blue economy strategy. And actually, I'm going to read this from the most recent federal throne speech. It was stated that at the same time, the government will look at continuing to grow Canada's ocean economy to create opportunities for fishers and coastal communities while advancing reconciliation and conservation objectives. Investing in the blue economy will help Canada prosper. And so the Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance, together in cooperation with the Fisheries Council of Canada, co-developed a blue economy strategy. So Canada is signatory to a high-level panel sustainable oceans economy. It's an international, multinational initiative that looks at the role that oceans play in a global economy. So they wrote a report, and it's called the Sustainable Oceans Economy by 2050, approximating its benefits and cost. And they estimate that investment in ocean economic activity can have an economic net positive benefit ratio of 5-to-1. And increasing production of sustainable sourced ocean-based proteins is 10 to 1.1. So it is a smart investment. And now, at a time when it's needed the most, now at a time where the markets are looking for Canadian sourced seafood, marine plant type of products, investing in the ocean in a sustainable way is going to be one of the ways forward in recuperating from COVID.
There's a lot of people who, well, not a lot. There's a certain faction that will always say exporting is a bad thing because it creates a carbon footprint. But if you compare the amount that we have to import compared to the amount that we export, this is building a food source here. And Bill, you're diversifying that whole food source by introducing seaweed. And we started this conversation about accessing capital. Other parts of the world understand seaweed better than we do. So have you had issues with raising capital domestically with people who don't get it?
Not so much that, Bruce. It's opening folks' eyes to opportunity and innovation. We're being, as a population in general, we're being asked to innovate. Canada is not as productive as it could be, for example. So we took a chance and invested in seaweed from an original VIEA report on business case development on Vancouver Island competitive advantage. We've been reasonably successful at the small amounts. We've just completed a raise of $1 million. Overall we've raised about $1.5 million, but this comes from individual investors that say, I want to do something positive for the planet. We know seaweed cultivation is climate positive, and it permanently sequesters carbon because bits of the seaweed sloughs off, goes into the sediment and into the deep ocean. We know that there's talk about carbon uptake by ocean greens. We believe it can be 20 times that of terrestrial plants. So there's no doubt this is an innovative new sector. When we talk about investment overall, Bruce, we as a sector are going to need tens of millions pumped in, but we get the outcome, the return on that investment is in the billions. There's no question in my mind that it can be done with the right combination of industry, government, and coastal communities, particularly First Nations. I'll tell you a story. When we first started looking at seaweed, we said, okay, who are we going to partner with? Who has eaten seaweed for millennia? Who has built seaweed as a base and a staple? And who understands working in the coastal zone and the contribution that seaweed cultivation can make to coastal peoples. So we thought, okay, let's go to South Korea. It didn't take us long to realize, why would we go to South Korea? We have coastal communities and coastal First Nations who have eaten seaweed, have worked with seaweed, and worked on the coastal zone all their lives. There's no need for us to look beyond British Columbia and coastal peoples of Canada in general to take this new and innovative product to market. So we're very, very keen we are seeking actively investment. The bigger ESG investors now are folks that we want to talk to because people want to save the planet and they want to do it while generating profit and providing coastal revitalization. This is a unique opportunity, but it demands innovation, both not just from our perspective, but from government. Government must innovate. I'll give you an example, Bruce. BC Agri Innovation Fund does not weed, which is crazy. It is more like a terrestrial plant than it is anything else. So we have to look beyond the traditional ways to fund these projects and these sectors. We demand innovation. We also demand innovation from government through the regulatory process. We plan to extend beyond 1,000 hectares. Cascadia and our First Nations partner need this to be able to satisfy the demand in the market. We need innovation at a regulatory side of things so that we can all prosper in rapid timing. This is not something that can wait 5 years. It has to happen now, and we can do it now. Bruce, Cascadia can see our way to a $55 million annual revenue, for example. We're just one company. There's room for more. And as Jennifer said, if you are getting 10 to 1 lift, then that's a $1 billion sector for coastal BC. It's at our fingertips and we must execute it correctly.
Great, thanks, Bill. So before we move on to the question and answer, one other little area we should wander into here. The results of the provincial election are being tabulated. We will have results sooner than later. So what are the opportunities here for policy advocacy? And John, John Paul, that's your background. You were a deputy minister and you've done that stuff. What do we need in the way of policy from government moving forward, both federally and provincially? Oh, on mute, sorry, still. That's the phrase of COVID. Is you're on mute.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I get that wrong all the time. One of these days, I won't be making that mistake anymore. I would say the first thing is that governments need to see what each other's role in the regulatory environment is. We do have some overlap. I would say on the provincial side, some very quality people have come in to help deal with some backlog issues, particularly around tenuring. And so I give the province a lot of good and positive marks for stepping in and recognizing that there was a backlog burden, some inefficiencies, and they're working hard to clean that up. But I think both levels of government probably aren't as familiar as we would like them to be with each other's role. So there's some overlap issues. I won't get into those that do need to be developed or at least be addressed. In our economic opportunity report, it's going to point out some areas where I think we can get those efficiencies, not shortcuts, but efficiencies in the regulatory process. I think governments need to also recognize that this is happening. I mean, if they actually gave, I'm going to guess that on the terrestrial side, and we love terrestrial, we live on the land. And we eat lots of stuff on the land, so shout out to our terrestrial folks. But I'm guessing in their regulatory environment, both federal and provincial levels of government have much more focus and interest there. And that's okay, but that needs to shift because the economy is shifting, there's opportunities emerging, and the planet is necessitating that more and more food is grown and raised in the marine environment. And I guess the other thing is governments should recognize that the marine environment, as much as it must be protected, and it will always be protected. And salmon farmers and people out there might laugh when I say that, are actually very, very passionate about marine protection. If we don't protect where we grow our food, we can't grow our food. It's the first principle of business. Don't mess up the place from where you derive all of your revenue. Love the place. And that's what we do, and that's what we're doing. But I think governments need to recognize that the marine environment is a place for economic activity. Jennifer mentioned the blue economy. That's a bit of a statement that I think goes over a lot of people's heads because they have picket fence, little house in the prairie notions of food production. The blue economy is a part of aquaculture and blue grown food production. And I think governments need to recognize as you grow the blue economy, where's the food growth element within that? It's got to be there. I think that's one thing that I'm not seeing a lot of. I'm not seeing a lot of real strong policy heft on both provincial and federal around the blue economy. And I'm hoping over the next couple of years that'll shift. And certainly the federal government's working hard, I think, to create that shift. But lots of work needs to be done there. And I guess the last point is just recognize that there are people out here. The political power in Canada doesn't reside in the small communities that all of us in this call today work in. I felt it. I felt that our industry has been cross-pressured politically on the federal scene by interests driven out of urban centers, whereas policies against us or that harm us don't even consider us. It's almost like we're invisible. And it's really too bad. So I think there's got to be some real strong safeguarding across government that you've got to be thinking outside of the box, which is urban centers, and look beyond and find out where that food and those opportunities are growing so that those urban centers can actually eat.
Yeah, like where John Paul and I are in Victoria, they're looking right now at an ocean cluster as a part of the blue economy. That's around marine technology and shipbuilding and ship repair. But at the same time, Jennifer, I'll go to you on this. When government is looking at policy and for investment, maybe the advantage is that much of what your operation does and bills is actually rural because it's outside of urban areas. Does that present an advantage?
I mean, it does when you're looking at where the products come from. You're going to need coastline and coastal communities. And also if you're looking for that economic driver, which government does recognize that aquaculture is an economic driver, that's where you're going to need it the most, is these rural communities. I just want to share an experience. I've had the experience when a government has supported aquaculture activities, the absolute positive benefit that was tangible. So I had worked in British Columbia for a number of years. As you said, I've grown up in Newfoundland. That's where I'm from. I grew up in the commercial fishing industry. The Cod Crisis in 1992 not just devastated my family, it devastated every single community in Newfoundland. It was an awful time. And I was in first year university at the time, and I remember thinking, holy, how are we going to feed people healthy food when the demand for seafood is so high, coming from a province that the currency was basically seafood, and do it in a sustainable way? And it really set me on the path of studying aquaculture. But in 2008, I was recruited back to help develop the salmon farming industry in rural Newfoundland, 22 communities that were incredibly hard struck by the downturn in the fishery. When I first moved there, all the houses were white. Nobody was doing any maintenance. It was hard pressed to find like a man. I was like, yeah, gee, everybody's women and children. It's because the men were in Alberta working at that time. There were no jobs. And in the center of these towns were large, beautiful fish plants that once had been thriving that were just sitting empty. And in 6 years, once we got the industry going with provincial support to have the engagement with fishers and community members about the activity that was planned, we saw a complete turnaround. Fish plants were opening, men were coming home, people were buying toys. Each community then started building homes. There hadn't been a home in one of these communities, a new start, since 1979. And all of a sudden there were subdivisions going up, new families coming in. It was a complete turnaround. And so when I had the opportunity to move back to British Columbia, I wanted to take that experience and do it again here for First Nations. My passion is seafood, but it's also about economic development for First Nations as a means of participating in reconciliation. And I wish the government here does never have that experience of what we had to go through in Newfoundland with the Cod Crisis to understand how important economically this industry is. But I will tell you, it is a very important sector. And as Bill said, what he can grow this kelp business to and have that benefit going back and filter into coastal communities is absolutely phenomenal. So I would like to see more. They're seeing it a little bit now with COVID, the importance of the economy and seeing the adaptability of particularly the finfish sector. But they need to really buy into it and promote it. And I would like to see them spend more time with First Nations who support this activity, talk to them on the government to government level, understand that there is high level support for aquaculture development in British Columbia. And we're about to start consultations on an Aquaculture Act, and that's a federal government initiative. But I would like to see that promoted so that the experience can be uptaken by First Nations. Another quick thing, we went to the VIEA Aquaculture AGM and conference in February, and I was really excited. There were so many First Nations participants, First Nations business owners, First Nations partners, and 3 different times I heard the same story from different leaders saying 10 years ago, I was asking the industry to get out of our territory, or I was writing eviction notices, or I was unsure about the industry. And 10 years later, now we have these amazing partnerships. We're reaping the benefit. We fully believe in the sustainability. One of them said they looked at it because it wasn't an extraction activity. It was putting fish back into the water. It wasn't extraction. I thought that was marvelous. And if the government and in the development of this Aquaculture Act could also look 10 years ahead, knowing that technology is going to change and improve, adaptability is going to change and improve, consumer are really behind these plant products and these fish products, to put in the policies in place to allow that activity to continue to provide opportunities for First Nations and coastal communities. I want them to really be open-minded about it and have the forethought of where we're going, because it's going to happen. Canada needs it, the world needs it. People are going to continue to eat food. It's going to happen with or without British Columbia, and I would rather see it happen with us. Agreed.
So let's share all of this good news and opportunity we have with the people that are attendees at this event right now. So if you have a question or a comment for Jennifer, Bill, or John Paul, please go down into the chat function, do it there, and we will take the comments and questions from that area. I'm going to do also a little quick adjustment on the lighting in this room here because the sun just came out. And I think I'm going to move my laptop around a little bit. Okay, so the Q&A thing, the function is at the bottom. I will read out the questions that we have so far, and if you want to add anything to that, please do so. And you can do that by going down, as I say, to the Q&A function at the very bottom. And we have some already here. First of all, can any one of the panelists tell us how rural BC can position themselves to take advantage of these innovative products? How do transportation costs factor into doing business away from the larger centers? Who would like to lead on that one?
Well, I'll start, Bruce.
Okay.
As VIEA has pointed out on numerous occasions, the transportation infrastructure, particularly on Vancouver Island, is strong and underutilized. So any new industry that we can bring to the fore, we'll be able to take advantage of that. Transportation costs are important in the seaweed business in particular because there's a certain shelf life until the product becomes stable. But I believe as part of the original foreign direct investment work, as part of the Vancouver Island Foreign Trade Zone work, from air transportation perspective, it was just as much to go from the lower mainland in Vancouver as it was to go from Victoria or Nanaimo to points south in the States. So transportation costs are always an issue with food. But there's nothing unusual or inordinate about the transportation costs that we will have to use when we transport our products.
Great. Jennifer, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Bill has hit it on the head. I mean, certainly transportation is increasing in your cost when you're an island and you rely on ferries and other modes of transportation. But it's one of the costs of doing business here, but it's also where our product is. It's also where our workforce is. It's also where our skilled workers are, and it's also where our traditional territories are. So the cost is offset by the fact that all the opportunity and the needs we have are here on the island.
Great. Okay, John Paul, your sector find the same thing?
Yeah, I would add that actually something government can look at to support all industry. Vancouver Island is the transportation, particularly road network. I went out to Zabelis not long ago and was amazed that I actually made it out there. And to think that big trucks have to go full of fish back and forth, not just for our industry, but others, how dangerous that is. I think there's some significant improvement that government can look at. And now would be the good time to do that when you're looking to stimulate economic recovery in the face of the largest economic downturn that any of us has ever seen. There's no one on this call, unless you're 100 years old, that's experienced the pandemic, and if you are 100 years old, congratulations, and the economic collapse that comes along with that. So now would be a good time to be looking at those road network systems, west coast of Vancouver Island as well, up to Port Hardy and the communities up in the Mount Waddington area. That would be a huge benefit to all our industries and all industry on the island. And I would add one point before Jennifer gets in here, that those they're not insignificant costs, but that's that's the cost of doing business, and we want to stay here, which is why it's very important because of transportation costs to keep operating costs and other things in line. And so there are ideas around mass shift to land-based aquaculture. We won't get into that today unless someone out there wants to, but the costs that go into that are so significant that the output makes the transportation costs then really challenging, which is one of the reasons why, if there is a force to land for salmon farming in particular, transportation costs may take us right out of the off the island and out of the province completely. So that's something to think about as well.
Okay, Jennifer.
And in term, also including communications in where the improvements need to happen as well. I know it's the transportation question, but just access to cell service and improved communications. There are some very limited areas here on the island that are important that could really use some better services so they can fully take advantage of new opportunities as well.
Yeah, that's been addressed by a number of governments, and one of these days you got to think it's going to happen. Next question. Is there room for small independent operators in farming kelp on or around Vancouver Island? Bill, is that, you're shaking your head? Yeah, yeah.
It's an interesting question. We get asked many times, how come, if it's such a good idea, how come it hasn't been done before? And it has been done before. There are numerous smaller operations growing kelp, and the destination for the market has typically been artisanal
whether it's pickled bull kelp or other forms of dried kelp. I look at the Canadian Kelp Resources, for example, in Banfield, have been doing it for decades. We think part of the reason that smaller independent operators haven't really broken the market is because in order to break a market in food services or for large scale food delivery, you have to have the volumes. So in the States, they use a cooperative method where out of season lobster fishers will put kelp in the water and they will sell it to processors who will consolidate that and deliver it to the market. It's possible, although our model isn't quite cooperative, it's more of an integrated value chain. The point is that with the right framework, and Cascadia and the Pacific Seaweed Growers Association are very keen on having this happen. There is room for independent operators, but you really have to be looking at plus 5 hectares, maybe even 10 hectares before you're going to get the efficiency in growth to be able to make it profitable. It has to be profitable for everybody.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. I have a direct question for Jennifer. Jennifer, when partnering with companies seeking tenures within nation territories, have you had to invest equity, or are you able to leverage support and working together without requiring cash?
Really depends on the partnership. Again, I'll go back to one of the messages that I had said is that there's a lot of leverage that First Nations bring to the table with the access to tenures, with having reduced time in your application by having that agreement in place at the forefront, access to a workforce. But it's really dependent on the company you're dealing with and who you're partnering with, what those details look like. And in some cases, the partner puts up the cash and equity, and the First Nations partner will put up access to the resource, the workforce, and other things. But in some cases, it's a joint equity or joint capital investment. So it's dependent on who you're partnering with and the details that you negotiate within that partnership.
Great. Okay. I will begin the next one here with you, John Paul. Person saying, first of all, well done, all 4 of you. I find this a very interesting discussion for our coastal communities. Question is, how can an individual like me, bracket, relevant attributes include islander, recreational user of marine environment, in a business unrelated to aquaculture, passionate about environmental, cultural, and economic sustainability, close bracket, assist in the economic development and social acceptability of your industries, being fish, shellfish, and seaweed aquaculture? John Paul.
Well, it's an excellent question. And I think you can see the wheels in my mind turning to process the answer. Well, I think if I could shamelessly self-promote my organization and our industry, email me afterwards, john@bcsalmonfarmers.ca, and we can talk a little bit about some of the work that we're developing, David, and we'll be announcing in very short order around the opportunity that we see for our sector on our island. We've done some projections, and I think it's significant that it's going to have a very large macro effect for people in and outside the sector. Your neighbors who are on the farms, and those who depend on the activities on the farms. So give us a call. There's going to be lots of opportunity to also engage with us on that program, to share content, to comment on content. And it's the first time in a long time that I think our sector has really heavily and significantly evaluated our true size and our potential size. I think it's going to come as a refreshing shock, if you can put those, if that's not an oxymoron, to government and otherwise, when people see just how actually significant the industry already is, how connected we already are in communities, and how much more opportunity exists right across the island as a result of sustainable growth for us, for Bill's sector, for Jennifer. It really is. I mean, 20 years from now, we could be looking at this beautiful island in the Canadian context, really leading and driving a massive and outsized punch way above our weight economic contribution to Canada. And I mean contribution. And again, for you people out there in government, I can't see you, but I know you're there. Contribution is a key word. It's a key word, especially when you're staring at a real difficult decade ahead. It's going to take all of us, and it's going to take time to get through this. And I think that people on this call are really poised to be part of that. So we shouldn't think small. We should actually think big. And now is a fantastic time to think that way.
And I think part of that question too is related to the possibility of maybe investing in operations like all of yours. And I would suggest that perhaps this person reach out directly to all of you to find out what those options are. Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, but I think the question was, what can they do? And it's talk about it. My experience has been that people who don't have something good to say are the loudest in the room, and those who are in support remained quiet. And my experience has been, the more I say, you know what, I support this industry, I support aquaculture, and here is what it is. Most times I'm surrounded by people who say, yeah, no, we've read that, or we've seen that, or I know somebody who works with you, and they support it. I remember doing the Eat Vancouver show with the BC salmon farmers, I don't know, about 15 years ago. And I was scared. I was like, holy smokes, we're gonna go and try to feed all these people in Vancouver some farmed salmon. This is gonna be a long weekend. And it was so refreshing, because I'd say 90% of the people came over and said, I love your product, I buy your product. And it was an eye-opener to me that we need to talk about it more. Those people in support and First Nations communities who are in support and have had positive experiences need to talk about it, because you will find that you're surrounded by other supportive people as well.
Yeah, Bruce,
Bill?
I'd also add support VIEA, because VIEA supports local communities. Eat local. Island Good is a good example. If you see the Island Good sticker in your local grocery store, buy that food over anything else. Be careful of how you treat your land. Environmental support comes one backyard at a time. So don't flush things that are going to get into the system and end up in your coastal zone, because coastal zone sediments are the charcoal filter of our fish tank. So it's really important that we manage our coastal zone well. And as Jennifer said, don't be afraid to speak up. Tell your local MLAs, tell your local MPs that you really want this to happen, and please make it happen on behalf of the planet and coastal communities in general.
Okay, we're just about done for this session now. I will remind you that we're not going to get to all these questions, but there's going to be some roundtables at 2 o'clock today, one on Finfish and one will happen around seaweed. But just really quickly to wrap it up, folks, one of the things I was going to look back on was the workforce idea. And of course, within our system right now, we have to look at a way of micro-credentialing or upskilling people so that we can fill jobs that are available to get them back into the workforce. And yours as a growing sector, are there enough people available right now? And is the curriculum available to teach the people that you need to hire? Jennifer.
There's definitely curriculum. There's a number of programs throughout each of the academic locations here in Vancouver Island that offer a lot of really amazing courses from all levels of aquaculture, everything from certificates right up to degrees, how to tie knots, how to drive the boats, those really important factors. There is a really good workforce, and I think that's one of the strengths that Canada has. I will say in our processing sector, it's aging. And we need to do a better job of getting into the schools and really getting into the youth and letting them know that these opportunities exist. They're really good paying jobs. They're also good careers. But certainly if you look around all the coastal communities, I mean, these are a lot of families and there's a lot of young people coming up, and we just need to make sure that they're aware of the opportunities exist, create those opportunities, because the workforce is here. And when we started the fish farming industry in Newfoundland, we tapped into commercial fishing. There were so many people with so many transferable skills from the fishing sector that were adaptable into the aquaculture sector, and that holds true here for Vancouver Island as well.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Really quickly, we're going to wrap this up though. Bill, any other comment about that? Workforce?
As Larry Johnson said of Nachalna Seafoods, give us the opportunity to allow people to stay home and work and live at home where they grew up and where their ancestors grow up, and we'll make this thing happen.
Cool. John Paul.
I couldn't agree more. And check out VIU, NIC, Pauline Stevenson at Excel Career College. some fantastic programs out there for through the whole range of skills required to get out there.
Yeah,
And,
certainly.
and oh, by the way, when you do get out there, you'll find that you're in a position that, from a remuneration perspective, is more than competitive. So check it out.
Yeah, I mean, people that are considered to sort of be unskilled right now that have been displaced by this economy, it's a lot of the sort of lower end, lower paying jobs. So this is a great opportunity in so many ways for all of this. So if you want to talk more about this, as I said, there are a couple of roundtables happening at 2 o'clock. One is on finfish and the other is on seaweed. Thank you for being here today, John Paul Fraser and Jennifer Woodland and Bill Collins. You'll be pleased to know that as a participant, you will be receiving a gift basket from St. Jean's Cannery.
Oh,
Is that just, yes.
Shocker.
And thank you for that, Jennifer. And John Paul, thanks to your organization for sponsoring this event today. And all of you that tuned in, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the summit, and we'll see some of you on the roundtables at 2 o'clock. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.